Well, this is the last video of the year, and I hope everybody had a very Merry Christmas and that you're looking forward to the new year. I know that I am, but currently at the time of filming this video, it's just the middle of December, and as you just saw, there is just over 2 feet of snow on the ground outside, and it's snowing off and on, but very little. We haven't had any real major storms here that have just dumped and dumped and dumped. So that's a good thing. I'm glad this winter has been very mild because, as you might know, I am still in a walking boot. So thankful that we don't have feet upon feet of snow outside, or that there hasn't been anything major happen around the cabin. And because of the fact that I'm in a walking boot, I'm not able to get to the projects that I need to around the cabin. So I've been taking things really slow over the last couple weeks. And today I'm just going to answer some of your questions. A lot of those questions had to do with my wood stove. And so I'm going to answer those to start with, and then we'll get on into some other questions that you all have. When I first moved into my cabin, my knowledge of using a wood stove was very limited. In fact, I only knew 2 things. I knew that I needed to clean my chimney, but was under the impression I only need to clean it once a year. That couldn't be farther from the truth. And I also knew that I wanted to be burning as hard of a wood as I possibly could. Here in Alaska, we only have 2 main sources of wood. You're either going to have spruce, black or white spruce, or birch. I chose to burn birch because birch has the highest BTU rating of all the wood here in Alaska at about 20 to 26 million BTUs per cord. So BTUs is the amount of energy or heat that is output when you burn. And spruce burns at about 3/4 the amount of BTUs that birch does. So that's why I chose to go with birch. I had a difficult time in locating an individual who could deliver firewood to my property, mainly because of where I'm located, but also because there aren't a whole lot of people advertising that, at least there wasn't at the time that I moved here. And so finding a reputable firewood delivery company was hard to do. I did eventually find someone, and they had both birch and spruce available. And it turned out that they were both the same cost. It didn't matter which one I bought, it was going to cost me the same regardless. So again, I decided to go with birch. What I didn't know, though, was that not all firewood is created equally. So when you get firewood, you want that wood to be relatively dry. You don't want it to be too dry, because then it'll just burn up quickly, and then you're not going to get the heat output that you're looking for, and you're going to go through wood a lot faster. And you definitely don't want to be using wet wood, green wood, or wood that has trapped moisture in it. I recommend that everybody get themselves a moisture meter to check the moisture content of your firewood before burning it. I wish I had this when I first moved into the cabin, because the firewood that I got the first year that I moved in here was wet. It not only had a lot of surface moisture on it because of a rainstorm that had come in right before it was delivered to me. So the wood was rained on for 48 hours straight with torrential rains, and left to soak up all of that moisture. But also within the firewood itself, there's a lot of trapped moisture. And this will tell you, even if it feels dry on the outside, this will tell you how much moisture is still trapped within that firewood. So the other issue that I had with the firewood when I first moved in here, and I didn't even think about it until just recently, was that I had received a certificate from the firewood dealer stating that the wood that he was delivering had only been cut a year prior. So it wasn't 2 years seasoned. And 2 years is about the minimum that you want that wood to be allowed to dry out naturally before you throw it into your wood stove. So not only did my firewood have a lot of surface moisture, but it also had a lot of trapped moisture in it. The other thing is that when I was using my wood stove when I first got here, I didn't know how to operate the wood stove. And I was really afraid of doing a really hot fire within it. And so I would load it up and then I would dampen it down, and I would keep a medium to medium hot fire going in there. What I didn't realize is that that allowed for a lot of creosote to build up in the chimney itself. Now, I had cleaned my chimney when I first moved into the cabin, but it didn't take very long before I had a chimney fire. And one of the questions I got was that chimney fire preventable? The answer to that is absolutely. Had I been using dry firewood for one, and doing a hot fire at the beginning and the end of every day, which would have burned off a lot of that excess creosote in the chimney. And if I'd cleaned my chimney more frequently, I certainly could have avoided that chimney fire. Now, luckily, that fire that I had was really, really small. I really only had 2 very small pieces of firewood in the firebox at the time, luckily. And I was up in the loft and I could hear crackling in the upper part of the chimney. That's what alerted me to the fire. I immediately ran downstairs and closed the damper on the wood stove, so limiting the air intake into the wood stove. And then from there, I ran outside and climbed up on the roof. Luckily, I had a foam roof at the time. And I just threw snow down in the chimney. Now, that is not the recommended course of action should you have a chimney fire. Throwing water or snow down your chimney is actually probably going to do more damage than it is good. But what I should have done is taken my fire extinguisher, because I had this on hand at the time, and taken the nozzle inside the firebox and aimed it up towards the chimney. That would have extinguished the fire right away. Then closed the chimney door and closed the air intake valves and gone outside with my cell phone and called the fire department and had them come over and verify that that fire was out, that there was no damage, so on and so forth. Luckily, like I said, though, the fire that I had was really, really small, and I was able to get it put out by myself. But there are some other things that I've acquired since then that can help me be reactive should I have a chimney fire. But I also want to talk to you about some of the things that you can do to be proactive to avoid a chimney fire. So speaking of being reactive to chimney fire, you can get something like this. This is Fire X. Here you can see the label for this. And this is just a dry powder. It's supposed to be a powder. Mine is kind of all caked together here. And you literally throw this entire packet right on top of the flames. The active ingredients in here will smother that fire and put out that chimney fire for you. But again, you need to close the air intake valves and then call your fire department. In addition to this, I also now have a couple Chimfex. And if you're not familiar with what Chimfex is, this is essentially a flare, like a road flare. No matter what you have on hand to put out a chimney fire, you need to be comfortable with the materials that you plan on using. If you plan on using a Chimfex, what you need to do first is remove the black cap. You're going to take off the white cap. You'll see that there's a striker plate on here. It's similar to what you'd find on a matchbox. And then you're going to strike that against the end of the Chimfex stick. Again, you do not want to have this aiming at yourself or anybody else, because this is like a road flare and there is going to be a big sparks flying out of here. You're going to then open up your wood stove. You're going to set this directly in front of the fire or beside it, but not on the fire itself. Close up the fireplace or wood stove door. Close up all air intake valves. Exit the building and call the fire department. This, though, if you have limited dexterity in your hands, you might find that this is a little bit cumbersome to open. Plus, there's only one little tab here that you have to find in order to get this open. And if you're panicking, that's not going to be that easy to do, in my opinion. So what I recommend instead is actually using the Fire X. Now, this is a zinc oxide cake like I was showing earlier. And according to the manufacturer of this, this can extinguish a chimney fire in 2 minutes. The Chimfex says 30 seconds, but it's going to take you a minute to get it open. Where this, you just pop this in. It can go directly on top of the fire, and in fact, it should. This is going to put the fire out, like I said, in 2 minutes, but there's no dexterity. It's so quick and simple to just do. There's no thinking about it. Close up your wood stove. close off the air intake valves, exit the building, and call the emergency services. And I'm praying that you never have a chimney fire. But if you do, I'm actually thinking that the Fire X gets my vote. But if you don't have those things, there are things, like I said, that you can do to be proactive and make sure that you don't have a chimney fire. And as I mentioned, doing a really hot burn at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day are two things that you can do, which will help to eliminate a lot of that creosote buildup in your chimney. So I do a hot fire by building my fire in a certain way. I start with the heaviest of the logs on the bottom, and then I layer smaller and smaller logs as I go up to the top of the wood stove. And on top, I basically am just having kindling on the very top. And interlaced in between each one of the logs, I have tinder. So usually that is the bark from the birch. If you're not familiar with birch bark and how it reacts to fire, it's like putting gasoline on a fire. So one match and I can have a fire going. I don't generally have to use more than that to get the wood to ignite. I open the damper up all the way and I let that burn for about an hour at a very hot rate of burn. But I don't want to get it too hot because I don't want to damage the wood. I don't want to damage the wood stove itself or the chimney. If you get your chimney red hot, you're going to actually cause metal fatigue, and that's going to ruin the structural integrity of your chimney. So those are a couple recommendations I have, is that, make sure that you're using dry firewood, the moisture content, and that you're burning as hot of a fire as you can within reason twice a day. New wood stoves have a catalytic converter in them, which will help to reburn some of the gases that come out with the smoke from the wood burning. And that'll burn off that creosote and prevent so much of it from winding up lining the inside of your chimney. As that creosote builds and builds and builds, it basically closes off the chimney, much like plaque in an artery would, and it traps a lot of those hot gases within the chimney. Because creosote still has fuel in it, essentially, that fuel will eventually get hot enough that it'll ignite, and that's what causes the chimney fire. So in addition to doing the things I just mentioned, the other thing that I recommend doing to be proactive is to clean your chimney multiple times a year, not just once a year. And especially if you use your wood stove on a daily basis and if you live in a cold area. As the heat travels up the chimney with the smoke, the further up the chimney it goes, it begins to cool off. And if you live in a cold area like I do, then that smoke is going to cool off rapidly, again depositing more and more of the fuel deposits, i.e. creosote, on the inside of your chimney stack, and therefore you're more likely to have a chimney fire. Now, I've had people recommend to me that I take the cap off of my chimney in the wintertime. I have not done that so far, but there are a lot of people that swear by that. They say you only need that on in the summertime as a spark arrestor, but in the wintertime there should be enough moisture out there that you shouldn't have to worry about that. And speaking of spark arrestor, one of the things that I personally do not do, but I know tons of other people that do it, and so to each their own on this one, is that I don't burn paper or cardboard in my wood stove. The reason that I don't do that is because paper embers become very light and they carry on a breeze very easily and can travel up to a mile away, landing on flammable, combustible items such as trees or grass or what have you, and start a fire. I know an individual here in Alaska who unfortunately lost his home because he was doing that. And I also don't believe he had the chimney cap on his fire when he did it. And it was the dead of winter when that happened. So that's why I don't do it. But, to each their own. Now, one of the other things that I do to help prevent the potential of a chimney fire is I use these Rutland creosote concentrates. These you just use once a week. You take the entire packet, and with a fire that's at a medium heat, you don't want a hot fire when you do this. You just open up your wood stove and throw that directly on the fire. And then it's going to dry out the creosote that's in there. It's going to basically eliminate the sugars or whatever the fuel source is that's within the creosote, dry it out so that it is no longer flammable. Now, it will not remove the creosote from your chimney. You'll still have to take a wire brush and clean out your chimney that way, but this will at least dry it out so that it is no longer flammable, and it will help to prevent a chimney fire. Now, I use this religiously once a week, and I've talked to other people who recommended this to me, and they swear by it. One of the individuals I spoke with said that after using it for a year, he decided to clean out his chimney and collect all of the creosote that he had scraped out of his chimney. He put it into like a metal coffee can and took a torch to it, and he could not get it to ignite. After about an hour of torching it, it would not ignite. And so that right there tells me that that's worth the investment. I will leave a link to all of these things that I've mentioned in the description of this video so that you can find these items for yourself. And just know that I am an Amazon affiliate. So if you use those links, I will make a few cents off of any purchases that you might make. So again, I appreciate anybody who does that. But, you know, the main thing is I want to keep people safe. So those are some things that I do to be proactive about preventing chimney fires. And one of the other questions that I got was regarding the placement of my wood stove. Previously, my wood stove was at the end of a counter that was built into the center of the kitchen when I moved into the cabin. And it was not set back from the edge of that counter at all. This stove is approximately 30 years of age, and it had been in the cabin for that entire time pretty much, and there was never an issue with it. So when my contractor moved the wood stove, he put it into position with the same depth measurement as it had before moving in. Now, I did recently look up my wood stove manufacturer specifications for placement on their wood stoves, and it turns out that due to the nature of this wood stove and the backer that I have on this wood stove, it is actually placed in the right position. The only part that has me questioning whether or not there should be some amendments to how my wood stove is installed is regarding the chimney going through the floorboards here. That's the only area where I'm concerned about it. But again, I have metal flashing on there, and I have double wall chimney going through the floor here. So I have double wall chimney going all the way up from the second floor all the way through the roof. So I'm not too concerned about it. I also have a heat gauge on that section of the chimney, and it's never hot. I can hold my hand on that. It's roughly about 100 and some odd degrees. So the chances of me getting a fire in the floorboards from the chimney stack are very minimal. Then another question that I received was regarding these fans that I have on top of my wood stove. And could I recommend a brand? I don't actually know that any one brand is better than the other. I've had a few different brands, some that were sent to me, some that I've purchased myself, and they all seem to work about the same. They last about a year. At least that's how long mine have lasted. But I will tell you that if you have these fans sitting too close to the chimney and you get a fire that's over 600 degrees in your chimney, it'll burn out the solenoid in these eco fans. So be aware of that you need to understand to not do too hot of a fire while operating these fans, to keep the fans further away from the chimney stack so that you don't burn out the working components of those, and they should last you for a good long while. So I'm assuming that the last ones that I had quit working because I had a fire in here that I got way too hot, and before I could tamp it down, the fans had suffered from that. So good to know, don't get your fires too hot and keep these fans away from the chimney stack. Again, I will link these ones here, which I recently purchased. I'll leave a link to these in the description box down below this video as well. All right, let's head off into the other room because I want to talk to you about some of the other questions that have come up. questions about when I go to build in new railings for the loft, will that cause some cold areas up here? And I don't believe that it's going to. At night, after I light the wood stove for the final time of the night and I dampen it down, even at about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, it is so warm up here in the loft that I can barely sleep. Um, and so all the heat gets trapped in these low areas of the loft where the ceiling has sloped down. And the other thing is, in my office where I typically do my live streams from, that room is completely walled off. It's the only room that has true walls and drywall up, and that room does not get cold either. So I don't believe that I'm going to have to worry about the loft getting cold, just simply because of the fact heat rises. When it comes to the railing in the bedroom area, I will not be building this super tall. And partly that's because I have this ceiling fan right here. This ceiling fan helps to draw the heat from upstairs and circulate it through the entire cabin. So on the nights when I'm running that, the cabin's warm throughout. If I don't run that ceiling fan, it's freezing down on the main level of the cabin and it's warm up here. So this does a great job of circulating the heat and regulating the temperature in the cabin. And I need to just get in the habit of using that more often so I don't wake up in the night suffocating from the heat up here as it is. But I don't think the upstairs is going to get cold whatsoever. And also I just wanted to point out, this is the heat gauge that I have on the chimney stack that is in the bedroom loft here. And you can see that it's at 100 degrees right now. The temperature is at its lowest pretty much here. And this is not hot. Like, I can hold my hands on here with no issues, and that fire is going down below. And yes, I have the lampshade off so I can have some extra light up here because it is dark in the loft. So that is one other thing people have asked about is, will I miss the light that will be coming up from the cabin? Well, right now there isn't a whole lot of light in the cabin. I've shown previously how I just recently purchased a floor lamp for the living room. Other than that, there are no lights in the living area of the cabin. And up here in the lofts, I just have a little nightstand lamp behind me and 2 lamps on either side of the bed that none of those provide a whole lot of light. In the sewing room, there's one small window. In the office, there's one small window. And so there's just a little bit of light that filters in as far as daylight goes. But considering that most of the year I have the windows covered up in the cabin anyhow for insulation purposes, I'm not going to be losing out on any more light than I already am. So the light isn't really an issue for me either. There were also some questions completely unrelated to heating the cabin. And most of those had to do with, how am I doing living by myself out here in the middle of nowhere, whether or not I ever get lonely here. And I don't actually. A lot of times I'm keeping myself very busy with projects that I have around the cabin, or I'm conversing with you guys in the comments. I'm watching other YouTubers' videos, talking to you guys on live streams or on Patreon. And so I don't really get lonely. Plus, I do talk with my family at least once a week. And so that helps me to stay, in touch with them and know what's going on in their world. And so loneliness is not something I get. Now, there was a question about whether or not I get cabin fever. Do I get cabin fever? No, not here I don't. I actually think that I had more cabin fever when I lived in Colorado. Why? Because I couldn't always go to the mountains, and that's really where I wanted to be. And where I lived, from my home, everybody could see into each other's backyards. And so I couldn't even really go into my backyard without feeling like I was stepping into my neighbors' backyards. A lot of times they would be entertaining back there, and I felt like I was invading their party, crashing their party, if you will. And so every time I would drive home too, all I could think about was, I'm heading the wrong direction because I was heading away from the mountains. Now that I live here, I am where I want to be. I have a beautiful view of the mountains right outside of my cabin. I'm surrounded by the forest. The birds are chirping. The moose are coming through the yard. There's fox and there's the ermine. I couldn't be any happier being where I'm at. And the other question was whether or not I get scared living where I'm at because of the amount of wildlife or just being out here by myself in the woods. And I don't. I don't scare very easily. It would take a lot to unnerve me or spook me. And so really, for the most part, I'm not scared. Now, I do keep my head on swivel because I am aware that there is dangerous wildlife that could potentially be right outside my door when I open up my door. But for the most part, I'm not scared at all. There was also a question that came up regarding the caliber of the gun that I'm normally carrying in my holster when I'm out and about around the cabin. And that is my 357 snub nose. This gun is my preferred carry, just mainly because I like the leather drop holster that I have. I have two of those drop holsters that I can interchange, but they are the most comfortable. If I'm wearing something where that drop holster is not necessarily practical, then I'm carrying my 10 mils. Now I have a couple 10 mils. This is my Smith & Wesson 10 mil. I also have an F&N 10 mil that has a 20 round mag in it. And that I like to carry, but it's a bit heavy. So either one of these are what you're going to see me carrying generally. And then, like I said, I have firearms positioned throughout the house so that I can protect myself when the need arises. The other question that I received was, what did I used to do before doing YouTube? And I've had a number of jobs over the years, but more recently, prior to making YouTube my full-time job, was that I was an inventory manager. So I managed inventory for several companies over the past few decades. And at one point I was also a spokesperson for a major corporation for a Fortune 50 company. And I did video training, basically, is what you see here, for various departments regarding compliance. So that's why sometimes I sound a bit stiff probably when I talk to the camera, because that is still ingrained in me a little bit. I try to let go of it and try to just be natural. It's not easy. It's definitely not easy. In fact, for those of you who probably haven't figured it out by now, I'm actually a very shy person, and you could probably make a drinking game out of some of my videos in some of my nervous tics, especially where I use the word "and" as if it's going out of style. So if you're looking for a drinking game for this holiday, maybe just watch some of my videos and see how many times I say "and" in one paragraph. And you might get a little tipsy before you know it. With that being said, though, I'm going to go ahead and conclude today's video. I want to thank you for watching. As always, if you haven't, please like and subscribe to this channel and this video, and I will see you again next time. Happy holidays. Have a happy and safe new year, and please enjoy these outtakes. Well, it's the last video of 2024 where spruce burns at about 3/4 as hot, or has as much as only 3/4% English sucks. This is not easy. Just use the other one. So, yeah, that's what that is all about. There was one more question, and I'm trying to remember what it was because I put my notes down someplace and I don't know where I set them. I don't see them sitting right here in the kitchen.